some of you who grew up in the 20s, 30s, and 40s smoking, because it was a cool thing to do, because it was the in thing to do, and then realized later in life, my God, this stuff could kill me. Lung cancer. We didn't know. Maybe today it's hearing about all the plastics that are in our oceans and that doesn't get recycled, and we think, I've been drinking bottled water for now 15, 20 years. But now that I know the impacts, I just didn't realize how my practices or things I once held had impact on the creation the way it did. And things I have been doing don't fit neatly into maybe what I should be doing before you. When our beliefs or our practices come into crash course contact with a new way of seeing or believing, happens in the church all the time in history. Galileo, studying Copernicus. The church saying again and again, the earth is the center of the universe. All the worlds, all the stars center around this one achieving moment, this little marble in the world, in the cosmos, earth. Everything is founded on being centered, geocentered. And Galileo says, no, what I'm seeing in these Jupiter moons, what I'm seeing in these celestial bodies, Copernicus is right. It's all going around the sun. But all the entrenched people in the church, the Inquisition, imprisoned this man for the rest of his life. Oh, it's just house imprisonment. Yeah, he went blind and he died in chains. In visiting South Africa on one of my trips there, had met a Dutch Boer farmer named John. John had several hundred acres of land, and as African tribes began to want to reclaim the land that had been taken from them by the English and Dutch, he found that there were squatters coming from Zimbabwe and Zambia and Nigeria and fellow South African tribes who were on his land, and he kicked them off. He forcibly had them removed by the police. And he said to me as I went to visit him, God didn't intend for the races to be equal. I said, what? He said, yeah, read Genesis. Ham is cursed by God because he sees his father doing whatever he saw in the tent in his nakedness, and so he's cursed by God. I didn't bother to tell John it was really his grandson that's cursed by God, but anyway, we didn't want to get into the fine. But he said, yeah, and Ham's black and his brothers aren't. And I said, what? Where are you getting this? He said, my church has taught me this since I was a boy, Dutch Reformed Church. How else are you going to defend apartheid and people living and separated by the color of their skin, even people of color, one husband who's darker than maybe his lighter skinned wife? No, you're not married anymore because you don't fit the right shades of classification that we've given to colored and Indian and Bantu. And so this is what his church had taught him. This is what he believed biblically. They had constructed this. But then John said, but as I began to go into the townships for workers, I saw these people I had removed and where they were living, and they didn't have anything to eat. And so I began to go and hire them to work my farm. I pay them more than I pay my sons, because I also tell myself, Jesus wouldn't want me to treat these brothers, he used that word, in faith differently. He wouldn't want me knowing that they don't have anything to eat. He'd want me to do something. Yes, John. So all this tradition that he'd grown up in, suddenly this undercurrent, this life-giving water starting to put some cracks into all these things that he'd held based on race and prejudice and pride. And all of a sudden, John is starting to say, yes, but in this relationship with Jesus, I know, this doesn't quite make sense. You ever been there in your faith journey? Whether or not church, should LGBTQ people be included as equals? Some battles around that. In the 1850s and 60s, over enslavement of people, and a lot of our foremothers and fathers saying, yes, you church leaders who are saying, yeah, again, slavery is permitted in the Bible, but in our experience with Jesus, we don't believe anybody should own another person. This doesn't align with the way, the truth, and life as we see it. And so, no, we're willing to go all in because our experience and our interpretation of Scripture is different than what we've always been taught. Nicodemus was a man of the law. Supreme Court of Israel, all right? 70 men plus the high priest who presides over it, chosen and elected based on pure lineage traced back to the patriarchs. And to be a part of the Sanhedrin, this Supreme Court, he had to know the law inside and out. They decided all the big cases of the people. And as Nicodemus was meeting with the Sanhedrin, they had a problem. They had a Jesus problem. This itinerant rabbi from Galilee is stirring up the commoners. He's leading them astray in some dangerous teachings. He's healing on the Sabbath. He's breaking the rules. We've got to do something about this guy. But Nicodemus also hears him say things like, you have heard it was said in the Torah, hate your enemy, love your friends. But I tell you, love your enemies and be kind to those who persecute you. You've heard it was said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but I say, don't resist evil people. Walk a second mile, turn the other cheek. And as he's hearing Jesus say these things, kind of hiding himself in the crowd, he thinks, there's more to this guy than meets the eye. There's more than the Sanhedrin are saying. This doesn't jive with what I'm feeling about who he is. So he goes under the cover of night. Doesn't want his reputation tarnished. He's more than a little worried about what his peers will think of him. As his experiences with Jesus and his teachings and his miracles are starting to erode at this narrow black and white, with us or against us faith that he's held. Either it's true or it's not, fact or fiction. So he goes in the dead of night and he starts off by, hey, let's always start with paving the road with a little bit of compliments, right? Hey, we know you're a great teacher. You do amazing things. Nobody could do this apart from God. Jesus isn't interested in his compliments. He says, listen, Nicodemus, unless you're born again, born anew, born from above, you'll never really fully realize the kingdom of heaven. Nicodemus says, born again? Are you talking reincarnation, going back in the womb, Shirley MacLaine stuff? What's going on here? He's confused. And Jesus says you got to be born of water, yes, your mother, but also of spirit. And he says, just like Moses lifted the snake, the serpent in the wilderness of the people, so too the Son of Man will be lifted up. All right, now I know Nicodemus was lost. How many of us are lost a little bit here? Snake lifted up in the desert. How many of you know this Bible story? 1, 2. That's okay, that's all right. It's in Numbers, it's buried in Numbers a little bit. It's not one we often roll out as frequently in Sunday school. So here's what's happening. As Jesus is making this reference, the people of Israel have been led out of Egypt, of slavery, by God, and Moses is leading them. And as he's leading them, they're walking around. He doesn't have a road map, 40 years, they're getting lost. And the people start to complain. Hey, the food stinks. There's nothing to drink out here in the desert. We want to go back. What? You want to go back to slavery? Yeah, at least we knew we get 3 squares there. It wasn't great, but hey. And Moses, oh gosh, what am I going to do here? And God hears the people complain. And so the people start to get bit by poisonous snakes, venomous snakes. And the people say, oh my gosh, Moses, do something. We have complained. We haven't been thankful for what God has done. Surely God must be punishing for us for this or doing something. Don't call me Shirley. But maybe there's something that you could say to God and God can protect us from these snakes. So God says, hey, Moses, make a pole with a bronze snake, hold it up. When the people look at the snake, the venom will flee from their bodies. They'll be healed from their sins. So Jesus is taking this kind of lifting up, in this case of a serpent, to heal the people of their sins. And he says, you know this story, Nicodemus. You're a Pharisee. You know things back and forth in the Torah. I'm telling you, the Son of Man is going to be lifted up for love of the world. Not to condemn the world for all the things that people have done wrong or the sinfulness of the world, but to save it, to redeem it from itself, to make it whole again. And Nicodemus says, what? He's not sure. Would you be? I mean, what is he talking about? We hear born again and we have context. We think of maybe specific people or televangelists or something. Nicodemus has no idea what he's talking about. And he's wrestling with it. What does it mean? Somehow, some way, as he's walking away from this conversation with Jesus, I've known the law. I've grown up being righteous before God, trying to be obedient to God, doing all the right things and not doing all the wrong things my whole life. People see me and respect me, but this man is telling me something is missing in my relationship with God. Yeah, it's rote, do this, don't do that, but, well, do I really have a relationship with God or my neighbor in a way that's meaningful, in a way that's real, in a way that's part of who I am, not just what my career is? And so Nicodemus begins to wrestle with this. And the next time the Sanhedrin meet, there's a Feast of the Tabernacles. Nicodemus is mentioned 3 times in the Gospel of John, and only in the Gospel of John. And the Feast of Booths or Tabernacles, where people are celebrating kind of the harvest, and everybody's in Jerusalem, Jesus decides he's going to go out and speak publicly. And he tells people, listen, I have life-giving water. If you're thirsty for God, come to me. He doesn't say go to the temple. He says, come to me. And the Sanhedrin say, no. Hey, Rabbi, this is not going to work, capiche? They got to come to the synagogue. They got to come to the temple. They got to work through the system we've established. You're an outlier. This is not okay. Then he says, as people in the crowd, probably some of the Sanhedrin, criticize him, you broke the law. You healed somebody on a Sabbath. To which Jesus says, John chapter 6, guys say it's okay to circumcise a child on the Sabbath. You're working on a body. How can you have a beef with me when I am healing somebody's body and bringing them restoration? Makes no sense. Was the law written so that people couldn't find wholeness for man, or was it the Sabbath made for rest for the people before God, the spirit of the law? So right there and then, the Sanhedrin decided to arrest him. Without any trial, without any jury, going against their own policies, they send out the police. Go get this guy from Galilee who's speaking to the people and bring him back here. The police come back empty-handed. Say, one job. We gave you guys one job. Where is he? Oh, guys, hey, if you had heard this man speak, he's incredible. We've never heard him. Oh, my gosh. They dupe you guys too? And they decide Jesus has to go. We've got to get rid of this guy. And Nicodemus, who's been in the shadows, a closet observer of Jesus, suddenly steps out, sticks his neck out and says, now wait a minute, guys. Our rules say we have to bring this man to trial, to hear him, to defend himself. You can't just go arrest him. And they say, hey, listen, son, you better go back and hit the books, Nicodemus. Because apparently you missed the lessons there that none of the prophets, no way a Messiah or the great prophet comes from Galilee. So don't tell us, don't lecture us, because sometimes when we take a stand or our faith shifts and we're standing for something that we believe God is calling us into, sometimes our peers and our friends don't all jump up and salute and say, hey, that's great. We're with you. What do you mean you're not going to a Catholic church anymore after you're raised and baptized a Catholic? I've heard a few of you say that. Not that there's anything wrong with the Catholic Church, but if you grew up in a certain age, you never step foot in a Protestant church. That just, What do you mean your church is inclusive? You guys aren't real Christians. So Nicodemus, I'm sure, just as the children thought, made some of the other Sanhedrin members angry. If you've seen Remember the Titans, watched it with my kids a few weeks ago. There's two scenes in that movie. It's about integration primarily, but it's a football movie. T.C. Williams High School in Virginia is the first high school to blend a white school and black school, to bring them together and to, during football season, before school starts, because you're going to practices, though the white coach, who is part of the coaching staff, assumes he's going to get the job, he's qualified, he's been a winning coach, he's won several state titles, Coach Oates. He's passed over, at least in his opinion, by Herman Boone, the first black coach to coach high school football in Virginia. And at first, Coach Yotes is a little put off by this, and they have some friction because they're both winning coaches. They both know football, and they go to training camp. And right away, there's some fights between the black and white players. And over the early course of the season, the team captain, the white team captain, pulls one of his friends, who's also on the team, aside. Ray has missed a block in one of the first games of the season that has intentionally, because he's totally missed the block, caused a season-ending injury to the team's black quarterback. So Gary Bertier pulls him aside and says, Ray, you're off the team. You're cut. And he says, what are you talking about? The coach doesn't cut anybody. He said, I'm having you cut because I know you hurt your teammate on purpose just because he's black. He said, oh, is that how it is? You're going to side with them now? And he says, Ray, and he says, no, you can have them. We see another scene a little bit later. Coach Yotes is with his lifelong assistant coach, decades together, Herb Tyrell. Tyrell is talking about all the changes. People have they think they own the place now that we're having this integration. He's grumbling. He's complaining. And he says, where's your daughter tonight? And he says, oh, she's over playing at Coach Boone's with his daughters. And Herb looks at him hard and says, is that how it is now? Coach Yotes has begun to see far past color and friendship, deeper than black or white, the character of who we are and the beauty of white and black and how we are, who we are. And he says, Herb, I want you with me. Can't you see? And Herb says, you go to hell. And he walks up and quits the team. Sometimes where the Spirit leads us in being born anew is painful. Because other people of faith around us say, it's black and white. It's right there. You're reading it wrong, Nicodemus. You're reading it wrong. In the Gospel of John, it's so beautiful. This imagery of light and dark. In the beginning was God created light. And the light is in the darkness, and the darkness has never overcome it. You know these verses. Here's the verdict. The light has come into the world, but men love to stay in the shadows of darkness. And almost as if a beautiful metaphor, here's Nicodemus coming to Jesus in the dark, because he's kind of spiritually in the dark too, but he's coming to him in the dark of night, and Jesus is bringing him to light. Abundant life could look so much different for you, Nicodemus, if you allowed your faith to be less than just rules and regulations and more about the kingdom of God being open to you all around you and the people you meet, in the ways that you see life happening around you. God is present all the time. Do you see it? And I wonder, Because the last story we have of Nicodemus is probably one of the most powerful. Do you know it? The Sanhedrin, of which Nicodemus is a part, has sentenced Jesus to die, to be crucified. And we see Nicodemus go to Pontius Pilate with Joseph of Arimathea, and he's begging Pontius Pilate, please let me have his body to prepare it for burial in the right way. This man means so much to me. And all the Sanhedrin friends and the high priests, this isn't something you can hide, Nicodemus. You've chosen a different side. You've come out of your shadows. Is this who you really are? Is this really what you want? Because you can forget sitting on the Sanhedrin anymore, pal. Just show me where you've laid him. Because this man's so much more than you think he was. Nicodemus, are you willing to be born anew? To let God really have you? To shape the things that you've held on to so tightly that maybe the Spirit of God just wants to break open? To see differently? How about you? Amen.